a cambiar un poco el orden justamente para darle coherencia a este planteamiento. Entonces tendría la palabra John Smith sobre este tema de organizar con los principios solidarios.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Can the back hear me okay? Perfect. Okay. Well, Jonathan and I, it's an honor to be here, as Jonathan said. It's also an honor for me to be here with the IWW because our story is very much intertwined, the relationship between the airport workers and the IWW, because both of us have been experimenting in solidarity unionism. The IWW in North America is at the forefront of it, but we're in a unique situation because we are a legal union. We're legal, we have a certificate and everything else, as opposed to the IWW. And this is where there's some differences, but as well there's some similarities. I want to take the story back a ways, and Mexico is the right place to give this story, because it's really at the halfway point between Canada and Argentina and Chile, and there's a context here. 8 years ago, I went to the first workers' conference in Buenos Aires, and there we got to meet union and worker activists from the IWW, but also from Chile and Argentina in the worker recovered enterprises. And it was a really good chance for us to exchange different ideas, different thoughts, because it doesn't matter where we are in the world, we're facing the same neoliberal agenda. So it was a really open opportunity for us to practically sit down and discuss ways to create a workers' economy, or for those of us not at that stage, to at least start raising working class consciousness and ideas of solidarity unionism. And the reason this became such an important discussion 8 years ago is what happened 4 years ago in Canada. I'm an Air Canada employee. I work for the airline called Air Canada. When I started in 1985, we were a crown corporation. We were owned by the government. We were a state carrier. When neoliberalism comes into a country, the first thing the governments do is privatize the flag carrier. When industries are deregulated, the first industry that is deregulated is airline travel. Airline travel and port travel, shipping travel, because shipping travel was never state-owned. The airlines were, the shipping won't. Globalization cannot work without airports and ports, because that is how the executives fly around. That's why Mexico wants to spend 1 trillion pesos to build an airport so that the CEOs can fly safely in and out of the country to do what they need to do, and the ports so they can ship the materials around the world. So we're very much, although we don't realize it, we're very much on the front lines of the fight for austerity. And what happened 4 years ago is the airline workers, we have high union density, but we're all in different unions. The pilots belong to one union, the flight attendants in another. I'm a check-in agent, ticket agent, I'm in one, and then the outside workers, the ramp, baggage, maintenance are in another. So it's impossible for these 4 unions, because the solidarity union concept does not exist in a traditional union model. Everyone wants to raid each other, or they talk about solidarity, but they don't practice it amongst themselves in the workplace. All 4 of our groups uniquely came up for contract renewal at the same time in 2011. And in the lead up to the expiration of the contracts, we started agitating very hard, because we were forced to do concession after concession since we've been privatized. And the government knew this. And the government increasingly got worried, and the government, as we became more militant, the government became more extreme in its repression. And unheard of, in 2011, the government passed 4 laws banning and taking away Air Canada workers' right to strike, collectively bargain, and freedom of assembly. It's unprecedented. Our union did strike for 3 days, but we had to go back because we were being threatened with prison and fines. So when we had this government come down this hard to take away our rights, it forced us to start thinking of things in a different context, because who can you bargain with if you're forced to go to arbitration? Who can you bargain with if the government is there to suppress and basically tells you the employer's position? So we started thinking and looking for different allies, because this is one company, and one company is not, like workers from one company is not going to change things. So we started reaching out with other workers in similar situations, and that is the public sector workers and education workers, because I cannot think of 3 more gated groups the public sector workers, education workers, and airline workers. They're always, you know, you can have postal workers maybe as the fourth one, but it's the same the world over. The state wants to suppress these groups. So we formed a solidarity pact with these groups. And we basically took the attitude, since the government took away our right to strike, we will support any strike we can anywhere. We will do whatever we can to disrupt the system, including within ourselves at Air Canada. We had wildcats, like we'd just walk off the job. Workers would call in sick, you know, we call them sick outs. But we also did creative things as well. And again, this is going back to, now we're back to Latin America, is we were I was very impressed with what was happening in Chile, with the student movement there. And in Quebec, we have members across the country, airline workers were Canada-wide. We were hearing about the Quebec students wanting to mobilize. And what we did is we actually, because the Chilean student movement was at the forefront of, if you remember back at that time, there were some very exciting things happening in Chile. So what we did is we flew Chilean student union leaders up to meet with the Quebec student movement. And we didn't care, we didn't need to be part of the discussion. We just said, look, you guys do what you need to do, and since we're airline workers, we have the ability to travel. We would fly people as needed to meet. We also did take part, and we did solidarity picketing. And John talked about the porter situation, and the IWW played like a really critical role in this because there was only 20 workers in a small airport. 20 workers aren't going to do anything. But what happened was the IWW, as he said, organized a flying squad. We had a solidarity flying squad as well. But the IWW were the ones there, and what we did is we provided logistical support to them. And their action, it was direct action. They won this strike. It was a historic strike. It was a war zone. That airport, like, we have stories and we have scars from what happened because the police came out in full gear all the time. We also committed ourselves to international solidarity. In the Philippines, the Philippine airline workers were all contracted out and forcibly removed from their jobs, so they occupied a portion of Manila Airport. And what we would do is, in solidarity with them, we would picket the Philippine Airlines counters in Toronto, and in solidarity with the porter workers who were on strike at the same time, the Philippine workers were picketing the Canadian consulate. So we would do these international days of solidarity, we call them. We did one with the Chilean students, with the Quebec students, Turkish airline workers. We occupied their headquarters at the same time the Turkish airline workers were bargaining. So there were very creative things about going on at this time. As well, the IWW, who are, you know, the ones who have the best tactics in terms of direct action, came in and taught us direct action tactics in solidarity schools. As well, though, we brought in the Greater Toronto Workers Assembly and the academics to try to raise working class consciousness. This wasn't a fight about our working conditions. This was something much bigger. It was neoliberalism. And things were to mobilize. Everyone come to this place. But this is like, you know, in the 21st century, everyone says social media is going to change the world. It's a two-way street. Because what happened in our situation was a union, one of our solidarity partners, but a union bureaucracy got very nervous about some of these posts that were going on about, you know, doing direct action wildcats, and they started feeding this information to the employer. So in one day, 11 of our comrades were fired. In a full sweep, that pretty much wiped out our organizing committee because they were all on this closed book. In another workplace at Air Canada, the company fired the entire union leadership. And it's a tragedy, but the bureaucracy supported it. And the workers were basically walked out the job. And there was some offers that if you could come back, but you could never do union activities again. So in the 2-month period of time, we lost pretty much all of that activist, that energy. And for the rest of the workers, it was total disillusionment because this was the first time people felt they were part of a union. And then this mass firing, mass termination, and every day it was just another activist being walked out the door, taken before an arbitrator and said, goodbye, you've lost your job, you cannot do this. And this is pretty much the low point because now what do you do? As John said, and this is why our presentation is so interlinked, the IWW does not operate within the legal framework. We do. And we're all workers. I'm 30 years with the company. We're all workers in our 40s and 50s with kids and mortgages and grandparents even. When termination hits people at our age, it's very difficult. And so fear comes into play very much. So we had to start thinking of different tactics. We couldn't do because of the limitations, and this is where Argentina comes back into play. I remember when I was down there meeting someone from a market in Santiago, Chile, and what they did is they organized the market stall workers into a union. These are people that have no relationship with either competition with each other. They're all in the same stand, but they formed a union. Well, who do they bargain with? They're self-employed entrepreneurs, whatever you want to call it. They bargained with the owner of the land because they said, we all collectively pay money to you. You're in charge of the following, so therefore you are essentially our employer. So they formed what they called a community union model against this one common element that brought them all together. And in an airport, we have a very similar situation. I'm going to talk about practical applications for other areas, but in an airport, they have airport authorities. And the airport authority is in charge of the administration of the airport. Doesn't matter which company you work for, what job you do, we all work at the same airport. And it ultimately is, we're not airline workers, we're airport workers, because that's where we work. And the airport authority in Canada is a non-profit corporation that's self-regulated, very similar to most models around the world actually. And what we decided is that this is our employers, the airport authority. We're not going to agitate against Air Canada or Air Transat or all the other airlines, because that's just going to get us fired. We're going to turn against the airport authority, because ultimately without us airport workers, there is no airport, and the airport authority needs to realize that. So through a bunch of creative actions, everything else, the airport authority eventually agreed to meet with us once a month. They meet, this is a big myth of capitalism, is there's competition between all these companies. You look at Mexico Airport, you see United Airlines, Mexicana, Air Canada, you think they're all against each other, they all hate each other. Truth is, they meet monthly with the airport authority together and work more as a union than we do. And we told the airport authority, you meet with our bosses once a month, you have to meet with us workers once a month, because we have issues too. And so for the past 2 years, we formed an airport workers council, and we now meet monthly with the airport authority, and we're bargaining issues of mutual concern. And increasingly, we're now pushing for things like a living wage, and we're actually making progress on that. In other airports in the United States, there's been some incredible gains made on a living wage, and we're doing the same thing through our Airport Workers Council. Practically as well, we do have a precariousness situation. Airline workers are precarious workers. Most of them are contract workers, part-time, no guaranteed hours, the definition of precarious. And there's always a contracting out, because airlines continue to contract one provider to another. And we've actually mobilized against the airport authority and have a 50% success rate of reversing contractualization. We're in the middle of a big fight right now, interestingly with a vice president who was the Pepsi Cola manager for Mexico, who came up to Toronto and decided to show us Canadian unions how it's done there. So we're in a very big situation right now. But the important thing is we're continually trying, we're continually adopting, and this is what is needed today. There is no answer. Every situation is different. But the important thing is that we're now finding success with this community union model. Who knows, it might break apart. It means we'll have to tinker and try something else. But I find with the left, generally speaking, we don't do that. We keep saying this is the one way to do it, and this is the only way to do it. When it fails, well, we got to try harder next time. But I really want to encourage people here to look at different ideas, look at different models, modify it for your purposes, and try to bring it into place. You know, a lot of you are education workers, and to give an example of how a community model might work, there's a lot of education workers that are never mentioned when I hear people talk about education workers. The person who vacuums this carpet, the person who changes the light bulbs, the vendors downstairs, the people who pick up the garbage every night. They're education workers too. And what we've done in our world is we brought all of us together. We're not just airline workers, we're hotel workers, we're the vendors, we're the actual maintenance, the mechanics. You can do the same here. Imagine how much power you would have, if all the workers because they're all working class, and we have to start getting these divisions between us removed. We're all from the same class, and we have to realize that the interests of the person who cleans this room is the same as the professor who gives a lecture the next day in this room. This is their space, and community unionism is actually a fight for property, is what it is. It's that the employer no longer matters to us. We don't care who our employer is. We don't care what company or what union we're with. This is my space. We're all going to be here, and we're going to bargain with whoever owns this space to make it better and more inclusive for us all. It's a challenge, but it is something worth doing. For those in education, reach out to the cleaning unions and see if you can find some commonality. This is how we started very basic stuff at Pearson Airport. We all complained about the air quality. So we all came together and forced the airport authority to do air samples. Anyway, I better wrap up, or? Oh, really? Nice. But no, I really want to stress that point, because the potentials go from an air quality into much more. Something, I can give a couple examples of things we're actually working on now to give you some idea. You hear about Ebola, the Ebola scare going on around the world. Us in the airports are on the front lines of this because it's being spread through people's travel. Under the neoliberal model, and it's the same in Mexico, United States, Canada, Argentina, it doesn't matter. The neoliberal model is the public health agencies work with the corporations, and then the corporations advise us serfs, the employees, what to do. Well, the thing is the employer never tells us what to do except keep working. And we've had at Toronto Airport a couple of scares. And the thing is that no one tells the worker what's going on. The worker's meeting a flight, and all these people show up in what we call hazmat suits. They look like something from a bomb shelter, covered in white and masks. Show up, and the worker's there in their uniform. And we're told to continue working. Well, we stopped working. We refused to work. And we actually, by coming together, all the airline workers together at the airport, we forced the Public Health Agency of Canada for the first time to meet with us workers, because they said that their mandate was to work with the corporations. We said, you and the boss can meet the flights, because there will no worker will meet this flight again. So if you want to go there, go for it, but there will be no workers. And by coming together, we were able to force this issue. Another issue we're having is over public transit. And again, these are not revolutionary things. The examples I'm giving are not transformative, but they are important in building consciousness. We have a major issue of public transit to our airport, and the government wants to create for the Pan Am Games a new rail service will cost up to 300 pesos one way to ride the train. No one, even us rich gringos, can afford that type of fare as an airport worker. We can't. It's designed for executive travel. So this one rail link from the airport to the city is for executives only. We call it Train for the 1%. So we started as airport workers saying, no, this is enough. This is public transit, it should be for the public. The airport authority and the government tried bringing us Airport Workers Council to the side and said, look, we'll give you airport workers a discount, just meet with us as an Airport Workers Council. We refused because it's public transit. So we're right now at war with the government demanding a public meeting. But again, as this develops, we're growing this consciousness. And that's kind of where I want to end. It is revolutionary actions always start small. It builds over time. And these are the type of small actions that we all can do. And it just requires us to open our minds and try and experiment. I guarantee next time you meet me, I'll probably tell you that this was a disaster. But the important thing is neoliberalism never rests. Neither should we, because this is the only way we're going to defeat it. Thank you.